David Dutton, and I love that he gave it to the lefties today. I know that that's deeply offensive to people, but I just think we should focus on what I mentioned at the start of the show, which is that the left doesn't own compassion. Anyway, he's saying, I'm going to jog on. My job's to be cop on the beat. My job is to ultimately decide who comes and who doesn't, and I, for one, like it. Have a look at what he said once again.
Some of the crazy lefties at the ABC and on the Guardian, Huffington Post can express concern and draw mean cartoons about me and all the rest of it. They don't realise how completely dead they are to me.
Hence why I look for all three of those outlets to be running plenty of soft profile pieces on the Sheila who'll be running against him in the seat of Dixon in the lead up to the next election. Darren, I want to ask you, what did you think of what he had to say? Obviously, in your time when you worked with Gillard, if she decided to hit at News Corp, there was great outrage, including from people like myself, but I was glad that he was giving it to people today. I don't mind when people in charge give it to those of us who often criticise.
True, but look, it's not really a surprise that Peter Dutton fires a shot across the bows over the lefty media. That didn't surprise me in the slightest. To go back to your editorial, I think it's worth pointing out one small thing, that the intervention that was launched by, or begun by Minister Brough and Prime Minister Howard was in response to stories on ABC's Late Line program. So I don't think you can automatically accuse them of ignoring those types of issues. But the simple premise of Peter Dutton not liking the lefty press, that's really not a surprise to me.
Well, but also, I've got to say, Bronwyn, I just like that. There's somebody who has those series of Australian values. Some are articulated, some are not, some are just simply understood, that he has this hard line. I've got no problem with it. And it seems to send the lefty press nuts because they are the media wing of the activist brigade.
Absolutely true, Paul. Let's say that the critics of Peter Dutton are cowards. They will not come out and criticise the murder of South African farmers and the confiscation of their lands without compensation. And these are the same people who won't stand up for women under Islamic conditions or Islamic law, where in radical Islam women were murdered and raped and burnt alive. These are the same people whose voices were silent on those issues. So we have to learn again not to tolerate and to discriminate, and I mean discriminate. We have got to discriminate and say who is entitled to come to this country. And we're entitled to say yes to South African farmers who are being murdered and having their land stolen and are under threat consistently. And we're entitled to say no to those Muslims who went from Australia to fight against our soldiers in the Middle East and now want to come back to this country with their families and take off when they left off. We need to discriminate and say yes to one and no to the others.
Here, Senator Leyonhjelm, what do you think about some of the stuff that's been thrown the way of the government, and especially this garbage about neo-Nazis and white Australia policy, when last time I checked, if you have a look from the front to the back bench of the Greens, it's all whitey?
Yeah, they're a bit crazy. It's interesting, isn't it, that if it was black farmers that were being killed, they'd be screaming their heads off. They are themselves racist because they can't understand that when white farmers are being singled out because they're white, and that's the issue, because they're white they're being singled out in South Africa, that's racism. They just can't get that through their heads. They're a principle-free zone, quite frankly. They have their sort of collective groupthink, their identity politics, and they make up their slogans, and that's about the beginning and the end of it. There are no principles involved. They can't transfer what you might think is a principle on one issue and transfer it to a different set of facts, but where the principle still applies. They would have been dead against apartheid, for example, in South Africa, which I spent some time in South Africa during the apartheid era. It was loathsome, but it was basically based on race. So now we have white farmers being attacked in South Africa based on race, and they're saying anyone who criticises that is a racist, Total principle-free zone, as I said.
Yeah, correct. Super producer Josh, get ready to show me that thing that we showed last night of all of those Greens and just how diverse their actual parliamentary representation is. Whack it up in a second for me, brother. Jane Hume,
it's fantastic, isn't it,
you're
Paul?
Defend your minister here. But what do
I am
you
going
think
to
about
defend my minister. Well, first of all, I mean, most of this outrage was caused by the fact that Peter Dutton suggested that South African farmers would due some special consideration in our humanitarian program. Why that was a surprise, I don't know. We've had special consideration for various interest groups or various groups in our humanitarian program for decades. Starting in, I think it was 1989, we had a special interest, a special consideration for women and children. 1991, we brought in a special crisis category, which allowed, Kosovo refugees and Syrian refugees to fall under our humanitarian program. But of course, the great frustration is, and you've hit the nail on the head there, Paul, is that this extraordinary confected outrage is coming from the whitest party that we have in Canberra. I mean, they're so diverse, the Greens. They have both Anglos and Saxons. I think they should be really proud.
And if you think we're joking, have a look at this. This is every single Greens MP in Australia, right? State, federal, local, it's all there. These are the... Look at this. OK, hang on. Line 1, position 12. Line 2, position 2. You've got to send out a search party. But when we're talking about the federal Greens, yeah, that's what we like to call a whitewash. These are the people who say the Liberal Party is full of neo-Nazis and is the one that is practising the white Australia policy. Please. Quick break, back with more, plenty to fire up about, including the Labor rorting here in Victoria, that because the footy started, it seems the media has already lost interest in. Bizarre. More in a sec.